Today we're going to look at two guns, one being a Pietta, then one being a Uberti. Both of these are Remington new model armies, 44 caliber. And we are just going to look at every difference. We're going to look at parts that may be interchangeable or not, quality differences. This gun I've had for a while, and I've done some alterations to it, and I'll try and go through that and explain what I did and didn't do. This one just got yesterday. So, my initial impression of these, the black on the Pietta is lighter. It's darker on the Uberti. On the Pietta, the pin for the grips is very stable in there. It doesn't move around at all. The Uberti, when I took it out of the box, the pin fell out. It's very loose sitting in there. I don't know if that's normal. I took a small piece of thread, put it through there, and pushed the pin back through so it doesn't fall out as easy. With the Pietta, you've got the writing on the sides of the barrels. The Uberti puts it on the underside of the lever. I'll look at all that in a minute. We'll pick it up and look at it as well. With the Pietta, I did crown the inside of the barrel just a little bit on this one because it didn't have one at all. The Uberti has a very nice crown. The Pietta, I don't know if you can see this in the video, the very end of the barrel is not cut flush. Like its high point is kind of on this part of the barrel right here is its high point. By holding it in hand, you can look at it and it's obvious. It's not, I mean, I don't know how far it's off. I haven't measured it or anything, but it's not hard to see, put it that way. Barrel on that one's cut way better. There was a few burrs in here on the inside of here that I had to clean up. A few burrs in here. So I can remember the timing was really good out of the box. Didn't have any issues with that. Set this over there out of the way just a little bit. So like I was saying, the black on this is much darker. It looks a lot nicer. Let's weigh these things real quick. Let's do it like this. Completely naked frame is just under 1.5 pounds. Like, what is that, like 1, 2, almost, we'll call it 3 notches under 1.5 pounds. 1, 2, 3, 4. What we got there? What is that? I'd say the Uberti is about 1 ounce lighter, which will make kind of a little bit of sense. One of the things that I've kind of noticed is I think the frame on the back side, right here where my thumb is, the base of where the hammer goes in, appears to be thinner on the Uberti than the Pietta. There's that crowning on the inside of the barrel, beautiful. The timing was really nice. I didn't find any burrs. The only burr I found was down this slide right here, and it's where the cylinder paw, I guess you call it, slides in up in like this. And right as it transitioned from on the, I guess you call this part of a ramp that this slides on, where that ramp transitioned on the upper part of the frame, this part right there was catching, and I just, you know, reached in with a little file and it's good now. It doesn't catch, it flows. And it wasn't hindering any operation with the gun, it was just hindering how putting it back together at ease. You know, and once you've got this out like that and you've got the hammer there and you put the screw back in, you try and shove it back in, it wasn't wanting to go past that. So that was the only burr that I dealt with on that one. let's look at these grips. I really like the red on this better. To tell you the truth, let's look at the other side. Same. This appears to be bigger. I have not compared this yet, but I like the red on this better. Like I said, this one is used. Let's compare this, because they do appear to be different sizes. Yeah, look at that. The Uberti is not as tall, but the Uberti is kind of wider at the bottom. But that's the other thing, is I'll show you once I put these on the Uberti, is the ends of the frames do, or the ends of the grips do stick off the frame a little bit. So that's the difference we've noticed with those. So obviously, if you take the Pietta frames or Pietta grips and try and put them on the Uberti, they don't fit. They're way too big. The bolts that hold the grips on are different. I don't know how interchangeable these would be. Oh, see, that pin moved. And this is the Uberti screw. I'll leave that one over here. This is the Pietta screw, and it doesn't reach far enough. It doesn't catch it all. Yeah, you can see the shoulder of the underside of the head. You can see the Uberti screw is much longer. In the Pietta, it doesn't reach. It appears to be the same size screw and same thread. If you had to, let's show this real quick. Yeah, see how the grips stick off the end of the frame just a little bit. So let's do that the opposite. Put the grips back on the Pietta. And try and put the Uberti screw into the Pietta. Definitely long enough. I'm just using a little screwdrivers for temporary, because I'm not tightening it down or anything. It does tighten down just fine, but way too long. So I mean, you could use it in a pinch. Let's check out the hammer springs. The hammer springs are a little different. This is not the hammer spring that came factory with the gun, is it? Yeah, it is. Because I had gotten a replacement spring, and a replacement spring didn't look as good as this one, so I've used this one. But these are both factory springs that came with the gun. They look really close, other than I would say the Uberti is definitely thinner. I will say I have noticed a lighter hammer pull. Yeah, you can definitely bend that Uberti spring better than the Pietta spring. Let's pull these back apart. Put some of these parts aside that we've talked about. Keep things in a little bit of an order. The hammers, let's look at the hammers. One of the things I've noticed with the hammers is the very tops. The Pietta is just the lines going across. and it feels grippy in both directions. Of course, not the side, but this back way it does. The Uberti, I mean, it's got kind of the same kind of grippiness, but that's what the back of them look like. They look like they would probably fit interchangeable with each other, except this shelf right here is different, and I think that will affect how, maybe not, I don't know. So let's try it. This is the Pietta. So let's try and put the Uberti hammer in the Pietta. All of that seems to line up okay. I'm noticing that gap right here, like this, the hammer doesn't come back flush with the frame, and it doesn't come back that far. I'm pretty sure that's going to affect how the spring works. I'm sure the spring will come off of that, especially with the spring being a little shorter than the other one. Yeah, I don't think that's going to work so well. It kind of looks like it does, but I don't think it will. Yeah. The cylinder paws on the back side seem a little similar as far as the spring, but the front is definitely a little different, and I don't believe that it will function the same. It seems wider, and this paw comes out further for the Pietta. The triggers also look slightly different, if you can see the profile there. Or you can see a really good example of the dark black for the Uberti. It's really hard to overlay those exactly perfect to see how they're gonna. I don't believe that those will function properly. I wouldn't even try and switch that over. I mean, because if you're dealing with something that's even the tiniest bit off here, you could end up making this gun have like a stupid hair trigger or something. I wouldn't. I'm no crazy gunsmith, but I wouldn't bother tinkering with that. Here, hammers. These are the hammer screws, and I would say that those are interchangeable. Same threading, same size, from the bottom of the shoulder down to the end of the post, they seem to be the same. This one is the Uberti. We know that that fits in there. Let's put it in the Pietta. So it's a little bit more recessed, but just fine. Yeah, the hammer screw you can swap over into either gun. sure if anything, the Pietta screw going into the Uberti frame probably just sticks up further. The head does just a little bit. Not too bad. I mean, the Uberti screws definitely look better to me as well. I don't know that I would, on something like this, if you have a chance to get a Uberti, then do it. But I mean, if you're in some situation and all you can resource is a Pietta, then this will work. The hammer screw will work. Those appear to be fairly different. Let's try those out really quick. Will this work for this? This is the Uberti screw, trying to use just a screw to hold the cylinder paw to the hammer. I don't think I want to try and do that any further. It doesn't, I mean, it feels like it's going in okay, but it doesn't recess all the way like it's supposed to. So that's different. But let's try the reverse. Let's try and take the Uberti hammer and cylinder paw and use the Pietta screw to hold it all together. I'm laughing just because this screw is so small. It's ridiculous. That'll probably work. I would say that will work okay. So you can probably use the Pietta screw in the Uberti setup. Of course, you know you can use that on there. Get that off of there. You'll also notice that the majority of or all of the internals, except for the hammer, on the Uberti are blued. Screw aside, we've talked about that already. This is the trigger, I guess trigger and cylinder stop screw. This screw is the oddball in the bunch that I say. Most everything is 4mm, and I think the threads are, I don't remember, I don't want to say because I don't remember. But they're all 4mm screws, except this one. This is like, I don't know if it's some kind of standard thing or if it's like a 3.5mm, but it's a bizarro. Threads are same, screws the same. The distance from the bottom of the head to the end of the threads appear to be similar. I would say the Pietta is a smidge longer. So we know the Pietta will probably stick out the side of the Uberti frame, but let's try and put the Uberti screw in the Pietta frame because it'll probably be short and we'll see how far it'll go. It threads, so it'll go all the way. Where did I do that? Oh, there it is. Okay. Now we're looking at the trigger guards, and this is where you'll start to see that the frames are slightly different. The trigger guard on the Uberti is not as wide as the Pietta. The back, I guess a little paw, or I don't know what you want to call that goes onto the inside of the frame to hold it. It sticks out further on the Uberti, and it's smaller on the Uberti. So you can get the Uberti onto the Pietta frame, but you can see that the Pietta frame is wider than the Uberti trigger. So it'll go on there, and you can probably screw it down, it'll stay tight, but vice versa, the Pietta is not going to go onto the Uberti. Not even, you know, you can't. You could probably shave that down. It's just brass to get it to fit in there if you had to. The edge of this will stick over the frame. Once again, you could mill that down. You could make this fit if you needed to. But that's that. I will say that I've noticed that this obviously looks bigger than it does on here. And the inside of here is more brushed. I don't know if that's just something somebody forgot or that's just the way those come. This is brushed to where the outside is polished. This one, it's full polished all the way around. This is the Pietta Uberti. The cylinder stop. The design is obviously different, but even when you put them side by side, they line up differently. The Uberti does not come out as far as the Pietta does. The Pietta stands taller than the Uberti does as far as the spring this way. That'll become noticeable when I show you some of the difference in the cylinders as well. So I wouldn't try and use this in either one of these guns. There's no way that this would work back and forth. Actually, no. I mean, you could probably shave, if you had to in a pinch and you had no other resource, you could probably shave off. I mean, well, this is either stainless or hardened steel. This is some very tough to work with. I'm sure it's the same as, I mean, I don't know, they milled that. You wouldn't want this to be a soft metal. You'd want this to be a crazy hard metal. Let's see if I got one of my files here real quick. I'll shave on a part that's not so important. I don't know, it feels like it's biting okay. But on this, it's about the same hardness, I guess. Okay, anyway, you could probably shave the end of this down. It'd be a really thin profile, but you could make it work if you had to, I bet. Same with the top of the ears. Barely take the top of the ears down just a little bit. You could maybe make that work if you had to, but you see how thin the profile of it would be? Anyway, that's that. They won't fit the way they are. The springs, I would say these springs are probably really close. I mean, well, no, you'll see in there. The Uberti is longer for the, what is that? That's the cylinder stop. Spring is longer on the cylinder stop for the Uberti. So you could probably shorten the Uberti and make it work in the Pietta, but I'm not so sure the Pietta will work in the Uberti. And again, you're seeing that one's blackened and one isn't, or blued, I'll call it. These two screws, I would say, are interchangeable. Those should work no problem. I mean, they're almost identical, except the Pietta has a slight dome to it. The Uberti is flat. These are the screws that hold the trigger guard down. And again, I would say that these are not interchangeable. They don't even have the same thread. Is that what this is? Yeah, that's what that is. This holds the trigger guard down, and they're not the same at all. They don't have the same thread. It's weird, because all the threads are basically the same throughout this gun on the Pietta, except for the trigger screw. So far on here, everything's different, or everything's the same except for the trigger screw and except for this. This is different threads for some reason. It's different than the other stuff. I don't know what that is. All right, so these two screws are definitely not interchangeable. These are the hammer spring screws, and I don't think these are interchangeable. It's designed differently. The Uberti, the top part of the frame is threaded, and then you've got like a post that sticks off the back, push against the spring, to where over here it's full threaded, and it's just the screw recesses like that and pushes on the spring. So I would say that these are not interchangeable. We can test just to see real quickie. You know what? I'm gonna look at the threads real quick too, because that doesn't feel right. I would say threads are the same. It's the same. I would say you would have to shave this down probably, but you could use the Uberti in the Pietta, but you can't use the Pietta in the Uberti. It won't go. The head of the screw will sit surface on the frame, and the screw doesn't stick far enough to touch the spring. So yes, taking the screw from the Uberti to the Pietta, but no from the Pietta to the Uberti. Try to keep these in the right order. The cylinder pins, I've modified this one. These are just grease screws. They appear to be kind of similar, other than there's that notch cut out right there. And what I have noticed is that there's more play, there's more slop in the Pietta than there is the Uberti, and I don't know if that has to do with that. That might not be interchangeable. We'll see how that comes into play here in a minute when we start trying to put the cylinders in. These are the loading lever pins. Yeesh. So much hair over here. What's going on? Excuse me. I would say those are, yeah, those are interchangeable. Those are close enough. You could use those. And same with the loading levers. I'm pretty sure I've already tried to switch the loading levers around. This is the Uberti loading lever, and I'm going to try and put it in the Remington, or I mean in the Pietta. What am I doing? Might as well try and I'm going to use the Pietta cylinder for a minute just to put all this together and try and use the Uberti cylinder pin. It does appear to go in okay. Again, I'm just using this screwdriver because I'm not really cranking these screws down or anything, or trying to really do any amount of force to them, so. Yeah, this one's okay, that does seem to. And there's a lot less slop when it does that. So this is a Uberti plunger and a Uberti cylinder pin, and they seem to fit and function. So there's that. But the other thing with that is the Pietta cylinder will fit in the Uberti frame, but it is a smidge smaller. And I don't know how well I can show this on camera, but there's a lot of play, way more than there should be, and there's a substantial gap between the barrel and the cylinder. It is loaded. I took caps off just so I don't have any issues. To where it's easier to see when you try and put the the Pietta cylinder into the Uberti frame. It just does not fit. It will not go. You can try all day long, it's not going to go. It's just a smidge too long. If you were to shave the face of this down, or maybe No, you wouldn't mess with that. Shave the face of this down. You could get that to fit if you absolutely had to, but in its current state, it will not fit. And I definitely would not put the Uberti cylinder in the Pietta frame. There is too much of a gap between the face of the cylinder and the barrel for me to be comfortable with. Let's try and put these, the Pietta parts, into the Uberti. As far as these, ooh, oh. I'm not sure how that's going to work. The Uberti plunger will not go into the Pietta frame. As far as the way everything else lines up, I would say that it lines up. But you can't get the plunger in it. You can see on the cylinders, the safety stop in between cylinders is deeper on the Pietta than it is the Remington, or I mean, I keep saying Remington, than the Uberti. Same with these cylinder stop notches, they're bigger on the Pietta than the Uberti. Let's see if these, I've got the nipples out, let's see how close the nipples are. No, nipples are not interchangeable. I'm sure you guys probably already knew that already. It's probably something that people commonly already try and switch over. But yeah, these nipples are very different. They won't fit each other. I think this is the Uberti, this is the Pietta. So the Pietta's bigger than the Uberti, and the Pietta has slightly finer thread than the Uberti. So I think that's all the differences I can show. I like both of these guns, but if I had my pick, I'd go with the Uberti. The Uberti seems a little bit better of a quality of a gun to me. I mean, just stuff with the color of the wood and just the bluing of everything.